What's up, shoemakers? Welcome back to Bomo Bespoke. Today, how we made this from this, coming up shortly. The inspiration for this class came from my man Charles, who sent me a WhatsApp over the weekend saying that he hadn't seen a video on how stuff like that was made on the channel. So I said, okay, expect something. Particularly that I'm, trying to show you guys how you can create designs of your min form without having to tape the last. So we are starting from the min form. So this is our min form. We had marked out all of the cardinal points, drawn the vamp line from the vamp point to the ball. Now we have drawn in a quarter line, divided the quarter line into two. And you know that the design that we're working on is an apron loafers. So being a loafers, we have to first of all design the basic loafers. So how do we start? Typically, we will start by, drawing in the tongue of the loafers. And like we did in the previous class, we marked in 1/8 of the last length from a point 1.5 cm away from the instep. So our last length is 35. 35 divided by 8 is 4.3. So we mark 4.3. Then mark half a cm under the middle of the vamp line and draw a line from the earlier point to that point. We curve in the tongue. Now the top line from where our quarter line starts to the back height. So this is the basic loafers really. Next thing to be done is for us to begin to generate the apron of these loafers. But first of all, let me highlight the various lines on the basic loafers for you. That curve at the top there, and our basic loafers is done. Now, if we divide by 4 the last length and mark, that point is a little too high up on the vamp to begin to do our apron. So let's use 1/8 of the last length. So from the tip, we mark 1/8, draw a right angle from there. And then 1/16 of the last length. You see, that's the rule of quarters. Everything is in proportion of the quarters. 1/16 of the last length is about 2.1-ish, thereabouts. We marked it on that line, and that formed where we drew a line to where our tongue started. And with that, we can basically curve it in, and our apron is complete. Maybe I need to pause this thing and explain to you what the dimensions really are. So the rule is the rule of quarters. Every major part of the shoe is a proportion of the last length measured in multiples of 4. So for instance, the distance between the tip there and where the apron starts is 1/8 of the last length. We would have used 1/4 of the last length, but that was too far into the vamp, so we chose to halve that and use 1/8. Again, if you take a look at the width of the apron itself, you would find that it is 1/16, which is 1/8 divided by 2. Meaning that whereas we had 1/8 of the last length as 4.7, we simply divided that 4.7 by 2, and we had about 2.3-ish thereabout. Next, we will draw in the bow. I basically used the width of my ruler, but of course making sure that I kept it well away from the intersection of the tongue, the apron, and the rest of the vamp. All of these maths that we have done have made me hungry, so let me get my vegetarian diet of fried plantain stew with no animal. What is the next step? If you said springing, you're correct. If you look, this part is on a straight line, so no need for springing. The bow is on a straight line, of course, no need for springing. So only the apron requires springing. The bow, no need for springing. Even that strip there, no need for springing. Just the apron will have to be sprung because it lies in an angle. First of all, we mark a few stitching points on the bow and measure the distance between them, about 6 mm, thereabouts. So we will use the same distance and mark all along the line of the apron just for consistency, because we are basically going to stitch this by hand. So we add all of those stitching points. Of course, you have to cheat in a few places, elongate, shorten, just to ensure that everything adds up. Then we count the number of stitches that we had, and it came out to a total of 23 stitching holes cumulative. Mark that point where the apron intersects with the rest of the vamp clearly. Mark it clearly, as you can see. Then let's begin to duplicate the parts that don't pose much problems. The bow, for instance, of course, we duplicate that and mark in the holes as well. So mark in the holes, 4 holes on this bow. We cut that out and I realized that I made a mistake. I should have added extra holes because this is the type of apron loafers where you are folding stuff on top of each other. So, but this one doesn't add those second set of holes. So I'm going to just recreate this bow and make provision to add those second set of holes. Mark out the center clearly, mark in the holes, extend the line, and basically eyeball the second set of holes. Now, in order for my stitching not to have problems, I'll have to extend the length of this bow. So our bow is done. We punch in the last set of holes. You see that I've added about an extra just to have some wiggle room when stitching. So let us cut out the apron right now and probably begin to spring it. So count first of all the number of holes that fall on the apron itself came to 21. That's going to be important. Of course, you see that we've marked the intersection points between the apron and the rest of the vamp. So to spring this is simple. We place the first parts that lie on the straight line on the vamp point, place the vamp point on the straight line, lie the front parts, and draw up to that same vamp point, using that point as pivot. First of all, marking where the vamp point originally was. Don't forget that. Then using that point there as pivot, you pivot towards the left a little bit, draw in, pivot towards the left, draw in, pivot to you get to the straight line. Then mark the new point where the vamp point has shifted to, then draw in the rest of the back of the apron. Now we have moved the vamp point about 1 cm away from its original point, so we take it back to its original point and mark in the back of the apron. And that is our apron sprung. We just need to straighten out the line for aesthetics. It looks better when it's a straight line, so we just basically cheat a little bit and straighten out this line. And there we have it. It's well sprung. If we were stitching with meshing, no more need. But since we're going to be hand stitching, we mark in that point of intersection on our sprung vamp and then basically cut out the vamp. We're of course going to transfer the 21 stitching holes that we got originally onto this sprung vamp. To do that, we're going to measure the total length of this sprung vamp from that intersection point to the tip of the center line and then divide it by 21. So let's measure. First of all, mark out that intersection point clearly. Marked it out, then measure from there to here about 10, from there to there about 2.5. So that's 12.5 cm, which translates to about 125 mm. If we divide that by 21, that gave us 5.9, basically 6 mm. So measure 6. And from that line of intersection, it's not accurate maths. You're going to have to, use your common sense. All you want to do is ensure that you have 21 stitching holes marked approximately equal to each other along the line of this sprung vamp, which is basically what I'm doing. And to be honest, when I use exactly 6 mm going all across, I fell short. So I had to go back, tweaked it, increase, reduce, and go back, started from the front, started from the back until I came to 21. You are going to have to just, use common sense. After doing that, I added about 1.2 cm beyond that sprung vamp so that I can add my second set of holes. And then I'll basically punch away. So we finished the punching, and there we have our apron. Duplicating the rest of the vamp is easy peasy. And then also duplicating this flap here is also easy since they are all on straight lines. But then don't forget to add the relevant stitching holes on the strap. And then I also added a stitching allowance at the top so that I will be able to put it inside of the vamp and stitch. I'll show you exactly what I mean. So add the holes and mark where, of course, the stitching starts. So let's cut out the flap or the strip, whichever. So cut that out. I told you I added about 1.5 or 1 mm stitching allowance at the top. Punch in the holes. And then of course indicate where the stitching holes start carefully. Then cut the tracing channels to indicate the stitching allowances. And then you can see that our strap is ready. So I will stitch these together. First of all, let me show you the entirety of the pattern that we have. It's a beauty to behold. And I'm proud of you for sticking to this part. I think this is the point where I remind you that we have membership options in the channel. It costs 750 Nigerian Naira, $1 or a little bit more or less than that to become a member per month. So, and there are quite a number of good perks for members. So let me show you how I have used that stitching allowance. You see, the pattern for the lining of the rest of the vamp is basically the same thing with the upper itself. So you see that that extra 1 mm is stitched in between the upper and the lining, and then this bow can be punched in here like so, and then the apron itself goes underneath the bow at the beginning part. Oh, so sorry about the camera angle, but you get the point I'm making. And then we are able to stitch it all the way through like that. So ladies and gentlemen, the video has dragged on. I typically like to keep these things under 10 minutes, but that was not to be. But this is what we got. I'm going to also stitch in by hand the rest of the flap. But thank you for staying on to this point. God bless you.